Have you ever had one of those days where you don't feel like doing anything? You're just in a funk, in a mood? I think we all have had a day or two like that, but it does become a problem when that day becomes weeks and those weeks become months. And so, as much as we want you to go to college, to go to vocational school, to do all the great things, to apply for scholarships, here at the Scholar Budget, we are also aware of how important your mental health is in the game plan to succeeding. So that's why we wanted to speak to someone that can shed some light on how we can improve our mental health, how we can maintain our mental health as we continue to journey forward and crush our goals and turn our dreams into a reality. So who's our guest? Well, Abraham Sculley is a passionate mental health advocate, speaker, and has a mission to eradicate mental health stigma. And he also fosters open conversations about mental illness, resilience, and well-being. He's been featured in the MTV documentary Each and Every Day, where Abraham shares his journey with depression and creates safe spaces for honest discussions, which we all know is super important. As the best-selling author of Unlearn the Lies, a guide to reshaping the way we think about depression, he debunks mental health myths, the ones that are stopping us from really healing. So grab your notepad, grab your pen, and your favorite snack as we jump into this episode that's really going to help us get prepared to tackle our dreams. You're listening to the Scholar Budget Podcast, where we teach you how to earn a debt-free degree, grow your money, and claim every opportunity with your name on it. I'm your host, Raquel Bartoli. Let's jump right in. So today we have the amazing Abraham Sculley with us. Abraham, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for the warm welcome. I am feeling amazing, even more amazing now that I get to have this conversation with you.
Awesome. And we are so excited that you are here because, the Scholar Budget Podcast is really just about helping students understand how to pay for college and walk away with a debt-free degree. But we know that behind the scenes, it's a lot of work. And sometimes we can be caught up in this space of doing, and then we don't pay attention to our own needs, whether that be spiritually, physically, mentally. So we know that you are the expert when it comes to this whole mental space. And so we're excited to have you. So Abraham, please, can you kick things off for us by sharing your own personal journey? Tell us what inspired you to become a mental health advocate, especially for our college students.
So this whole journey, passion, interest, curiosity came from being a college student myself. And I think most people that I've met who are in the mental health space, there's some sort of personal connection that leads them into that direction. And that was the case for me as a college student, first generation college graduate.
Yes.
And I moved from Miami, Florida to Pensacola, Florida to attend the University of West Florida, where I graduated with my degree in psychology. But the interesting thing about my collegiate career was the first semester of my first year was great. It was amazing. I had big goals, big ambitions. I was a very focused, determined, and motivated student. So I had the plan all figured out. And in my mind, the plan was going to work perfectly as I planned it out. And then second semester came around and I'm like, yo, this is real. And there are some challenges that I didn't anticipate. And now I feel stuck. So I went from being that very motivated student to not being able to look at myself and recognize who I was seeing in the mirror.
Wow.
I was isolating myself. I had no motivation to do anything. And it was so bad to the point where I remember being in my bedroom of my apartment because my first year I decided to go all out. So now I'm living in my own apartment off campus. I don't know why I did that,
Right.
just piled on more bills and stressors. But that's the route that I took. And I was in the bedroom of my apartment. It was a beautiful day outside in sunny Pensacola. And I was in my room with the blinds closed in complete darkness. And I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to do anything. And I get this phone call from a really good friend of mine who I had met that first semester. And she was just checking in. she was pretty persistent in checking in, and I was very committed to ignoring her as long as I could because I didn't
Right.
know how to articulate what I was going through in those moments. But this day I decided to pick up the phone, and we had an honest conversation. And it was actually one of the first honest conversations I had had in my life. And in that conversation, I felt safe enough to open up with her. And I told her how I wasn't sleeping at night because I was having negative racing thoughts. I wasn't eating, which is a huge red flag because I come
Mm-hmm.
from a Jamaican background. And
Love it. Yes,
and
I
my
completely understand that, friend.
my people can cook and I can eat.
Yes.
And I wasn't eating and I wasn't going anywhere and doing anything. And she listened and she asked me an honest question, which was, "Are you depressed?" And I said, "Absolutely not. People like me don't get depressed." And she
Right.
helped me to see how those same signs and behaviors that I was exhibiting was related to my mental health. She directed me to the counseling center, which is where I sought mental health support and was diagnosed with major depressive disorder, treated for depression. And that whole
Wow.
journey opened my eyes up to the reality of depression, things that we oftentimes think only affect those people, whoever those people are. And
Right.
now I am that person and I have to navigate this new thing. And it led me to change my major completely from information
Mm-hmm.
technology to psychology. And then I just became obsessed with creating spaces for these conversations about mental health. And fast forward a few years later, started this consulting agency called Speaks to Inspire, which is where I get to do this work directly with college students, very much like the college student I was years ago. And it
Right.
was from my experience that I'm able to connect with them, but it's also from the experience that really drives me to continue to do what I'm doing in creative ways to reach students.
I love it. I see how you've taken your experiences and now have turned that into a passion. And I'm a big fan of that part of life that we have the ability to do that. But I want to ask you, Abraham, was there anything specific that triggered your depression from was it one semester to the next, or was it 1 year to the next?
One semester to the next, but in reality, it was a lifetime of things that were unaddressed.
Wow.
So, and I say that to say we all experience negative or adverse childhood experiences. And because we don't realize how they affect us, we suppress those things for long enough periods of time. And at some point, they have to show up. And it just
Right.
happened that there were certain things that were suppressed for a long enough time. And now I'm this college student who's away from home, away from family, away from comfortability. And it's the
Uh-huh.
perfect place for an explosion, which is literally what happened for me. But specifically as a college student, and I love what you're doing, bringing awareness to financial education and helping students in this way, because we don't think about the role that finances play on our own mental health and well-being. And one of the things that I would say were triggers, obviously being a first generation college student, so not really having a foundation or background of, hey, how do you do this college thing? How do
Right.
you do it successfully? But then I kind of alluded to in the beginning, I had my own apartment, which meant I was now this 18-year-old kid with big people bills.
Bills. Right.
Right. So now I'm paying rent. I am paying electricity. I'm paying my phone bill. I'm paying all of these different things, but I'm also a full-time student, right? So there's stressors in that because if I'm paying bills, that means I gotta work. So
Yeah.
I can't just go to school. I have to work and go to school. So those were
True.
some stressors. Obviously being away from home, so there's some loneliness there as well.
Hmm.
When you can't, just walk to your brother's room or walk to mom's room and say, "Hey, I got this or that." So there's that
Right.
piece, and then with any life transition, I think it's important for just as human beings to realize whenever we go through life transitions, like an example is going to college, that is a life transition. Be mindful that there are going to be challenges that you have to work through because for the simple fact that it's a life transition. So you're doing
Right.
something new and you're doing something that you may not have context for. So those challenges that come up that may affect us mentally are inevitable. So rather than
Hmm.
waiting for those things to take us off course, we can be proactive in setting us up for success. Not saying that the adversity won't come, but we can plan for it and be prepared
Right.
when it does
Be
come.
be better prepared. Absolutely. And thank you for mentioning that, finances and managing finances does ultimately impact your mental health as well. Everything plays a part. And I appreciate your honesty. So what would you say is the driving force behind Speaks to Inspire? Like how is it tackling the mental health challenges students face today? Well, what are you seeing that the average person doesn't see when we're not working directly with students that are really going through these challenges?
The driving force is that we are on a mission to eradicate mental health stigma. That means like off of this planet, it no longer
Yes.
exists. And I
Uh,
think one of the closest examples that we can probably think about is at one point when we said the word or HIV or AIDS, right? There was a certain level of shame or perception
yes.
that we had immediately. It was almost to the point where if there was someone who, had HIV or was, impacted by that, there were, barriers that we put up, physical or in our minds, like stay away from those things. We don't talk
Right.
about those things.
Kind of like
But
leprosy in the
yeah,
Bible. Like,
there you
yeah.
go. There you
Yeah.
go. Now it's like we say these things, and in many cases, it's common conversation. And at Speaks to Inspire, that's our mission, to eradicate it, to where we can have these honest conversations, because the reality is we all have mental health. We may not all experience mental illness, and there's a difference between mental health and mental illness. But we all have mental health. And if we all have mental health, then we can talk about mental health and we can
Right.
work through maintaining our mental health. And it's better to do it together.
So, students can sometimes be ashamed, as you were saying, or apprehensive about talking about their mental health journey. So, do you think students can talk about this within their scholarship application? Because, oftentimes when I'm talking to students and I'm like, what was your success story? What was your failure story? Sometimes they're ashamed to talk about, that the fact they had depression, or there was suicidal ideation, or whatever the case is. So when it comes to like a scholarship application, would you say it's okay to talk about this within that application or within that essay?
I'm always an advocate for sharing our stories, but I also understand that we experience our stories and we know what we're comfortable sharing and not sharing. So if
Right.
the individual is comfortable enough and has done the work necessary to heal from certain things and be in a position to speak publicly about experiences that they've had, I would say absolutely do that. But the cool thing about scholarship applications and being able to shift our perspective around mental health is that this is an opportunity. When you talk about scholarship applications, it's an opportunity to highlight resilience. And one
Mm-hmm.
of the things that we know about human beings is that we are resilient. We've seen it, from the pandemic, and how many of us thought that there was no way we could bounce back from those challenges. And then we did,
Right.
right? And 4 years later, look at, the things that we're doing and accomplishing. So I think it's a great opportunity and a unique opportunity to get creative about the life experiences that we've had, especially around mental health, and highlight the fact that as a student, I was resilient to do what I needed to do and even excel in specific ways amidst mental health challenges, right? And
Right.
what that does for individuals is, number one, for someone who's reading that application, it helps to normalize the conversation around mental health. But then it also removes this perception of weaponizing mental health and those who are impacted by mental illness, right?
Very
If you can
true.
see someone, for me, for example, I'll use myself. If it weren't for depression and me being severely depressed, I would
Mm-hmm.
have nowhere near the level of empathy that I have for people. Like,
Right.
like now when I have conversations with people, I'm actually present. I'm actually
Yeah.
listening. When they say things that they've experienced that were hard, I am less likely to try to motivate them out of it or push them through it. I'm actually
Mm-hmm.
paying attention where that wasn't the case for me prior to depression. And so that's something that I developed amidst mental health challenges. And just in highlighting that in a form of a scholarship application helps the reader, right, or the decision maker see wow, this individual has been through difficult things and they didn't allow those difficult things to stop them, to break them, but they
Right.
overcame those things and they learned
Right.
lessons from those things. Imagine what
Exactly.
they can do on my campus in many different ways.
Yeah. And you nailed it. And another thing that you said, which I think is important, is the person who is healed and on the healing journey versus the person who has not dealt with it. So that should be an encouragement for students, adults, whoever's listening to start the journey. If there hasn't been healing or an opportunity to heal, then start that journey, whether it's with your school counselor, your advisor, a therapist, psychologist, whoever you need to, speak to, or all the things that need to be done so that you go from where you are to where you want to be. And then you're able to talk about, the things that you've gone through and how you've overcome adversity. So I love it. And Abraham, how can students spot the signs of mental health issues in themselves and their friends? And what should they be looking out for? And what should they do, in your opinion, especially in the college space? Like, what are those signs we're looking for? And then what do I do when I find out my friend's going through something, and or they say, don't tell anyone? Like, what do you suggest?
That's such a great question. And I get to hear it a lot when I speak with students. One of the concerns or just questions that a lot of students have is, well, I don't think I'm bad enough to seek support.
Interesting.
There are other people who are worse off. So I'm not at the level that you speak of. So this doesn't apply to me. And it's a very
Wow.
interesting concept because that doesn't just come out of nowhere, right? There are different things and environments and people that pass down certain beliefs or habits, and then
Mm-hmm.
as a student you take on these things without really questioning where it comes from or how effective it is to get you to where you want to go. Like when I think
Right.
about my physical health, I don't want to be in the worst shape and on my dying bed before I really start to take my physical health serious and start to eat
Right.
well and exercise. I'm thinking about maintenance. I'm thinking about, well, if I want to sustain what I'm doing, or if I'm thinking about longevity, what can I do today to set me up for
Mm-hmm.
when I'm 50, 60, 70 years old? But
Absolutely.
oftentimes a misconception around mental health is that we have to be in crisis, and then that's when we seek support. So you asked a power pack question, and I'm gonna try to answer it the best way I can. So
Okay.
so I alluded to some of the signs that I experienced where in the beginning I wasn't aware that these were signs that I was struggling with my mental health. I just thought it was a part of everyone's college student experience. So some of what I
Okay.
mentioned was I wasn't eating, right? So loss of appetite. Some people who are struggling with their mental health, maybe they're not eating a lot or they're eating way too much, right? Or more than usual. I mentioned not having motivation. I didn't have the motivation to get out of bed, to do anything, to go anywhere. I wasn't able to interact with others, right, in a way
Mm-hmm.
that I was used to. So for me, I'm a more outgoing, extroverted person, but I found myself withdrawing and isolating myself and not wanting to be
Right.
around people. And it was almost that when I was around people, I would have just this level of self-consciousness that I wasn't familiar with, right? And these are
Mm-hmm.
all different signs that I experience. And I'm not saying that if anyone is experiencing this who is listening to this, that you should diagnose yourself. That's not the goal here, but it is to
Right.
educate on certain things that you can look out for. But then overall, there are also things that, you can be thinking about if you have the level of self-awareness to know how you are thinking, feeling, and behaving when you're well. If you have that level of self-awareness, then it's easier to spot those thoughts,
Mm.
feelings, and behaviors when you're not doing well. And when I speak about mental health, I like to share with others that it's like on this continuum. On one end of the continuum, you're doing very well mentally, and yes, you're experiencing daily stressors and all of these, life is happening, right? But you're
Right.
able to
Absolutely.
navigate well because you're mentally well. In the middle
Right.
of that continuum, you're experiencing the same stressors, right? But now it's a little bit harder to do the things that you typically do. On the opposite end of that spectrum, this is where you're not doing well, right? This is
Mm-hmm.
where mentally You're drained mentally, you're fatigued mentally, it's harder to concentrate. And those same stressors that you experienced on the other end of that spectrum or that continuum, you're experiencing those now. And it's almost like it's the end of the world, right?
Right.
So any little thing can set you off, right? So when we look at mental health, like on this continuum, then I can now ask myself, how am I doing in regards to my state of well-being? Because mental health is a state
Right.
of well-being, right? So how am I doing if I look at it on this continuum? It's not, it's this or that, black or white, depressed or not, anxious or not. How am
Kind
I
of like a
doing?
scale.
Yeah.
Right.
It's how am I doing today, right? And how can I do what I need to do to get closer to that positive state of well-being? I like to
Right.
ask myself three questions. How have I been thinking? Excuse me. How have I been thinking lately? How have I been feeling lately? How have I been behaving lately? And if I want to
Mm-hmm.
go a little bit deeper in terms of that level of self-awareness, I'll ask myself those three questions. How have I been thinking, feeling, behaving in relation to how I typically feel
Right.
when I'm doing well? And just that quick assessment helps me to see I'm not doing well today, or I'm not doing well this
Mm-hmm.
week. What were
Right.
some of those things that happened that caused me to be in this situation? Sometimes when people are not doing well mentally, and it has been for some time, it's harder to be able to identify some of those triggers, right?
True.
Because we're used to those feelings that we've been feeling for such a long time. But the more practice we do with checking in with ourselves helps us to be in the
Right.
best position possible. So I would say that to some of the signs and things that we can look out for. I would also say rely on community, people that love you, people that support you, people that want to see you doing well. Because sometimes they can say things to you that are actually going on with you that you don't recognize in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't for my friend having that real conversation with me, I
Right.
probably wouldn't have seen what I was experiencing as what it was. And if I wouldn't
Right.
had seen it, then I wouldn't have addressed it. So having people around us to say, hey, I've noticed that you've been doing this or that, and being open to
Mm-hmm.
it, right? Being open to what they're saying because you know that they love you, they want to see you do well, they want to see you succeed, and being willing to make those different adjustments. It kind of reminds me of, so there was a study done in 2022, um, and the study found that 60% of more than 60% of college students met the criteria for at least one mental health condition. All right, so these are
Interesting.
conditions, anything from depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, things like that, right? But almost the same percentage of students, college students, also are more likely to reach out to a peer for support than they are to reach out to a mental health professional, even though it may be a free service on campus. So
Right.
what that lets me know is that, hey, students want to support their peers, and students are more likely to reach out to their peers when they're feeling these things, which makes it critical that we educate and equip the community at large, the campus community at
Right.
large, so that they're skilled enough to
Equipped.
support those who need the support.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. It's that like comfortableness. Like before I go talk to a mental health therapist, which probably knows what they're doing, I'd rather talk to my BFF about what's going on. So
Exactly.
I love how you're saying like our even our students. I'm even thinking like at the high school level, as a prior high school counselor, I'd have students come in and they're like, "Oh, my friend told me this, and she's thinking about this," and so then they're freaking out because they don't know how to handle it, and especially like when that friend says, "Don't tell anybody," this is just something I'm going through, and then you're like, "Do I remain the bestie that I'm supposed to be and keep my mouth closed, or do I say something?" So that education is definitely power. And I like how you said checking in. Like that is something that you have to practice doing, right? Literally checking in with yourself. Like, how am I feeling this week? How am I doing? And having that scale of maybe compared to last week, how was I feeling and doing? And then finding maybe there's some possible triggers that you can avoid that's triggering you to bring on these feelings, and maybe they're not avoidable, but it boils down to self-awareness really is what I'm hearing. The more aware you are with self, the easier it'll be for you to pick up on these things. So that's pretty cool. And what about for like um peer to peer? Like, is there anything that a peer could look out for or see, or would it be those same things? Like if you see your peer not eating as much, not sleeping as much, maybe utilizing drugs? Are those some of the things that you could kind of look at as a friend or a mentor and say, hey, there might be something going on?
Yeah, so a lot of the same signs apply. It's just as a friend being more intentional with what you're seeing. So that same friend that you typically text back and forth with every day, maybe it's 4 days and they haven't responded to two of your text messages. Maybe doing a deeper dive or a deeper check in
Right.
on that friend. Maybe they're used to FaceTiming you or having more in person time, but now they seem to be withdrawing just a little bit, and quote unquote making excuses for why I can't be around you, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
and and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with isolation, right? Intentional isolation, I think, is healthy and important. But when we close ourselves off from human connection, for
Mm-hmm.
long periods of time, I think we do ourselves a disservice. So as a peer looking for some of these things, I think just having a keen eye. So when we see those things, rather than putting it off to, oh, they're just busy, or they're just going through something and they'll get over it, I would
Right.
prefer that that peer says something. And the easiest way that they can say something, rather than or so that it doesn't come off as an attack, or come off in a way that is ingenuine, you can
Mm-hmm.
address the specific behavior that you see. So an example,
Okay.
let's say you and I, Raquel, were texting, and then a week goes by and I don't hear a response from you. Rather than saying, "Hey, like you've been really like ignoring me lately," right? I
Right.
think the
Right.
fit, right, and that can come off, and now you feel defensive, or
Uh-huh.
and now you have to respond to that, what I just
Like you've
said,
been
an
attacked.
attack,
Right.
yeah,
Like,
versus saying,
Okay.
"Hey, I text you on this day, and I was, just checking in to make sure everything is okay. Is everything
Right.
okay?" Right. So I'm addressing
Oh,
that specific action, that specific behavior that I saw,
right.
versus
Versus the person.
the person. You got it. So
I love
those are
that.
certain things that I would be mindful of. You said something earlier that I wanted to say, and then I just got reminded of it. Because we can't talk about this conversation of mental health and being challenged with mental health without the realization that suicide is a real issue, especially on
Yeah.
on college campuses. And many people, they will see something that can allude to this idea that someone may be thinking about harming their lives or no longer being here, but they won't say something because of the fear of having that conversation, the response that may come if I address what I just saw. And I would
Mm-hmm.
encourage anyone who sees something like that to say something regardless of the feelings that you may have that keeps you from saying
Right.
something. Because I would much rather have a friend mad at me and be still
Yes.
alive than not mad at me because they're no longer here. Right. And so
Right.
if that person gets mad because I said something about it or I asked them the question, then
That's be it.
so be it, but you're still here. Right.
Right.
And
That's an easier burden to carry than finding out a week later or a day later that, this person followed through with their plan and now you're holding on to that like, oh, I should have said something. So I thank you for mentioning that for sure.
yeah, and it happens so often, and it's very unfortunate when we hear those types of stories where after the fact we hear someone say, "You know what? As a matter of fact, I do remember them saying this, or I do remember
Wow.
seeing that. I do remember the drug use and substance abuse increase, but I thought it was
Mm,
just this. I thought they were
a
just,
phase or
yeah."
something.
And that's
Yeah.
heartbreaking to hear because it's in those moments where we have the opportunity to say something. And oftentimes when we do say something, it's like a sigh of relief from the person who's going
Like
through it.
somebody noticed.
Someone sees me, and this is a safe person that I cannot have this conversation with. Even though I may not want to have it at this moment, I know that whenever
Right.
I'm ready, I can talk to that person.
Awesome. And this is a lot, right? The just life in general can be a lot, but here we have these students that are preparing to go to college or go back into college, parents as well. We're all coming together trying to figure out common application, FAFSA, SAT, ACT. Plus, I have my workload, my AP classes, dual enrollment, sports, and life, right? So, balancing schoolwork and mental health can be tough. And while I want students to go out there and get as many paper coins, dollars, checks that they can get to successfully complete their college education, I want them to know that their mental health is a top priority in the game of success, not just in college, but for the rest of their life. So, what are your top tips for staying mentally healthy while crushing it academically and securing these scholarship dollars?
I would say be proactive, right? Let's not wait until we need to do something. Let's be proactive and be thinking through what are some of the barriers that may come up in regards to my
Right.
mental health. And then how can I reverse engineer and plan for those things so that when it does show up, it's not a big surprise because they will
Mm,
show up as college students. It's inevitable, right? So be
right.
proactive, I would say, is one tip. And then the other piece, and it ties, I believe, a lot with, finances, making money, keeping money, investing, and all of these budgeting, all these different things, is just commit to the work,
Okay.
period. Commit to it. I
Right.
think sometimes we think about our mental health and we're not doing well. And we say to ourselves, in 6 months, if I continue going to therapy, if I continue journaling, if I continue to do what I'm doing for my mental health, then after 6 months, I will be well and I never have to do those things again. Rather than
That's not.
saying, this is my life and I love
Yeah.
myself enough to commit to this work for the rest of my life, whatever the work is.
Right.
And when you can come from that perspective, you guarantee yourself success.
Right. And scaling, I think, too, as well. Like if you've started the first semester and you went in super excited and you're like, yeah, I can do this full-time schedule plus work. Then after semester one, you're like, bro, that was just way too much. Being okay with scaling and not thinking like, oh, I have to keep up with everybody else and I have to earn the degree in 4 years and it's taking me longer than everybody else. So I think also having grace with yourself for the season of life that you're in and recognizing that not every season will be the same, but going back to self-awareness. If I realize semester one was too much, then I might need to adjust in semester two. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. And that's a part of your journey. That's a part of your process. Everyone is
Right.
doing their thing, but their thing doesn't factor in who you are as an individual and all of the life experiences that you have. So because
Very
you
true.
are with you and you will be with you for the rest of your life, how about you create the blueprint that works specifically for
For
you?
you.
So I love that.
Yes. Awesome. Awesome. And Abraham, can you share some go-to resources or support systems for students needing extra help with their mental health?
So this is for students, which I love, college students specifically, and we get to do a lot of work with campuses nationwide. And one of the more, I guess, prominent resources on college campuses are counseling and psychological services centers. So it's
Okay.
short for CAPS, CAPS. And what's so good about these services on college campuses is that they have resources for free. A lot of times the students are paying for these services. It's in their tuition already, right? So if
Right.
they need to sit down with a counselor one-on-one or group counseling or online support, on-demand courses to help with their mental health, they can tap into the Counseling and Psychological Services Center on their campus, and be exposed to some of these resources. So I would say number one, that's a thing. But actually, before that, I would say being okay with asking for help. That's a
Mm,
resource to yourself,
right.
right? You are
Step
being
one.
you are being resourceful when you say to yourself, I am
Yes.
willing to become self-aware to identify what I need help with and have the
Right.
courage to ask for help. And
Raise my
then
hand and
don't stop
say, let me
asking for
help.
help until I get what I need, right? That's
Yes.
a whole nother mindset. And I think that is a mindset that is conducive for growth and success. When you can say to
Mm-hmm.
yourself, I will ask for help and I won't stop until I get the help. And and
Yeah,
and in the
absolutely.
yeah, and in the process of that, I will learn so much about myself as well as others. I'll build relationships that I wouldn't be able to build if I didn't ask for help. So those are critical things.
And I just wanted to share too, because I know that typically, like in the beginning of the semester orientation, that's when students usually find out about, mental health services or any kind of services on campus. And I just want to encourage parents as well to have access to these resources and to remind your scholars of these resources, because in orientation, everyone's pumped, excited. You get all this stuff, right? Then you're going through college, you're going through life, and sometimes you can forget. So as a parent, let's make sure that we're equipped as well, so that when we're touching base with our scholars or texting them and we're just not sure, we know what resources to send them as well, just in case. And Abraham, this has been such a great conversation. Before we close out, I wanted to know, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, last thing would be, I don't know where anyone is on that continuum of mental health that we discussed. So if there are some people who are listening who are really not doing well, I want to say that you're not alone, because that's the truth. You're not alone, and you don't have to go at it alone. Like, there are resources, there is support, there are people that are literally in position to help you, to get you where you want to be, where you need to be. So reach out for that
Yes.
help. And remember that we are better together. There's this African proverb that I really love. It says, you can go fast alone, or you can go far together. And the closer we can develop and the quicker we can develop communities of support, the best positions we put ourselves in to succeed.
Absolutely. All right, Abraham, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you.
My pleasure. This is great.
Hey there. I hope you were taking notes and you're ready to implement what you heard. If this podcast inspired you or helped you in any way, I would love for you to subscribe, follow, and share this with a student, parent, or educator you care about, because sharing is caring. Also, your feedback means a lot. So please leave a written review of this show on Apple Podcasts. And if you ever want to connect outside of the podcast, you can find us at The Scholar Budget on Insta or the Book of Faces. So until next time, shine bright and put in the work so we can make those dreams a reality. Bye!